Knowledge. And find all your beautiful faces first. All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're so excited that you're spending your lunch hour with us. My name is Trisha Stetzel, and I am part of the Texas Leadership Network. We are the Texas Leadership Network, a group of coaches across the state of Texas. I know, could you imagine that from the name? And we come together to present topics for business owners and leaders to talk about. Really thought-provoking topics so that we can help each other. And that's what this mastermind is all about. We have thought leaders, business leaders, and owners from all over the world. Actually, we've had people from out of the country as well join us. So we meet every month on the second Thursday of the month at noon. And each of our coaches takes an opportunity to present a thought-provoking topic for all of us to talk about. So you'll find several coaches on the call as well as business owners and leaders. It's about peer mentoring. It's about learning something from each other. It's a safe place to ask questions and share knowledge and really help each other grow as people and as business owners and leaders, and also find accountability partners. If you've got something that you want to work on, everyone is here to help everyone else. So group basics, no questions are dumb. Please participate. We want you to. That's what we're here for. It's not about talking at you. It's about having a group discussion, and that discussion being facilitated by one of the coaches with a particular topic. We all come together to share skills, create accountability, and also some networking opportunity here so that we can meet other business owners and leaders in the community. A real quick face shot of some of our coaches. We have several that are not on here yet. We will get their faces and their locations on here, but we are all over the all over the state of Texas, bringing you Texas Leadership Network Mastermind. Just quick around the horn so that everybody knows who's here. And if you would put your contact information in the chat so that we can connect with each other. Tell us your name, the name of your business or organization that you're with, and the location that you're at. And then you can put the rest of your information in the chat window so that we can dive into the topic. Sierra, welcome, first timer. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Sierra, and I'm a graphic designer here in Friendswood. I own a small company, a small studio called Sierra Designs.
Perfect. Thank you, Sierra. Just put your contact information in the chat window. That would be great. Omega, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Omega, and I do everything real estate. I have a builder's team that builds houses throughout Central Texas. I have property management here. And I also have realtors that are a team, and we cover 5 cities: Waco, Austin, Bryan College Station, Dallas, and all of Central Texas. So anything real estate, just give me a buzz.
Awesome. Welcome, Omega. We're glad that you're here with us. Kristen.
Hello, I'm Kristen Day. I own a visual business, so I help small business owners with their website development, SEO, and paid ads on Google. I'm in South of Texas, Houston.
And she's awesome.
Thank you.
Hey, Cortland, good to see you.
Good to see y'all too. Sorry, I'm running behind.
And no problem. Just a quick introduction, Cortland, of you, since we've got some new folks on the call.
Sure. Cortland Emmel, CEO of Pseudocol Labs. We are a service provider to the FDA industry in Dallas.
Awesome. We're glad that you're here today. Mr. Weaver, are you in a spot where you can talk? Otherwise, yes?
Yeah,
okay.
Quickly, this is Dave Weaver, Houston Veterans Chamber, representing the veteran business owners here in the southeast region of Houston, Texas. Thank you, Trisha.
Thanks, Dave. I'm glad you're on with us today. And Karen, are you in a spot where you can talk with us today?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Sorry about that, guys.
That's
hey,
okay.
Happy Thursday. I'm here. I'm Ambassador Karen McCoy with the Ladies of Justice, where we bring justice to everybody. And we also help attorneys go to heaven. So I'm here in Houston, Texas as well. Hey, Miss Kristen, good to see you today, girl. Thank you.
I love it. Fantastic. All right. And then all of the coaches on the call, wave your hands and put your contact information in the chat window. Fantastic. All right. It is my pleasure to introduce the coach that's going to be facilitating our discussion today, Mr. Philip Jorden. If you'd like to take control, sir, and get us rolling, we would appreciate that. And Philip, tell us whereabouts in Texas you are.
Okay, let me share my screen first. I am in Houston, Texas. A little bit about me. I've been 35 years in the healthcare industry. So my topic today is all about the COVID and what we learned from it. So I've titled this A Global Disruption, Looking Back and Moving Forward. So
Hey, Philip, will you just change your display setting? We see the presenter mode, sir.
Oh.
No worries.
Okay, presenter. Where is okay. Okay.
It didn't change, Philip.
Check the screen you're sharing, Philip.
Okay, let me stop sharing and share again.
Y'all know we checked this before y'all all got on.
Yeah,
and it worked perfectly. And there it is. You got it, Philip. You're fantastic. You may just want to back up a slide, but we see your presentation now. It's all yours, sir.
Okay. Okay. I hope that's my last faux pas of the day. Can't guarantee that though. Okay. So what I'd like to do is take a quick run through what we've experienced both in the previous years and also look forward to what the future holds for us. So if you think back in time, what events do you can you recall that affected the whole world in such a manner as the COVID pandemic? Well,
to me, it was real shocks as a child when the price of gas went from 30 cents a gallon to $1.50 a gallon. That kind of shocked all of industry way back then.
That's good, Bill. I hadn't thought of that. Well, the two I thought of were the first one I thought of was the Second World War, which occurred 85 years ago. Some could see it coming. Most chose to downplay it. But what happened in there was some localized devastation, especially in the European continent and in the Eastern Pacific Rim countries. But there was, worldwide sacrifices. First and foremost was all the servicemen and women that were killed in the line of service. But there's also an effect of the rationing of goods worldwide. If you can't remember, many of us weren't around in that time, but you recall your parents talking about, rationing goods, only getting so much chocolate to be able to buy during any given month, or gas. To Bill's point, gas was rationed, so you only had so many gallons you could purchase in a given time period. There was also the interruption of your daily lifestyle, whether it be dark out curtains that you couldn't even emit light during the evening hours. Not so much in the Midwest or Texas, but along the Eastern coast, there was I can't think of the word I want, but they were required to put blackout curtains on their windows, so there's no light emitted. So battleships that might be cruising offline couldn't fire on the land side. The next one I thought of is a lot more recent. It was the Y2K computer meltdown, and that only occurred well, it only occurred. It seems time goes by so fast. It's actually 22 years since that happened. There was a lot of planning that went forward in that. In fact, to the tune of 300 to 500 billion spent in the preparation for Y2K, and it ended up being one of the biggest non-events that we ever witnessed. But even with all the preparation, there was a whole lot of positive aspects that grew out of this. It developed a powerful new industry, the tech sector, which is, as we all know, has enveloped our daily lives to this day. It also started a cycle of rapid productivity gains through all the technology deployments. But coming up onto this pandemic, I was thinking back on Future Shock, the book by Alvin Toffler that some of us might have read. Alvin Toffler passed away in 2016, but his basic premise was there's too much change and in too short a period of time, and that accelerated change left people disconnected and suffering from stress and disorientation. Well, guess what? This past pandemic proved Alvin Toffler's hypothesis to be true. The COVID pandemic, if we all recall, the first human case was reported in December of 2019, and the World Health Organization declared the pandemic in March of 2020. So within that 90-day time frame, which is really not a long time at all, the world was turned upside down with closures from workplace and school to lockdowns in your house to supply chain disruptions and resulting economic chaos. What I want to do now is I found this neat website. It's called Our World in Data. And this is work closures at January 1st, 2020. And all this blue represents business as usual. But a short 90 days later, all the red, look at all the lockdown. About, from a population standpoint, probably 80% of the world was in a lockdown mode in 90 short days. So that's a rapid amount of change. And then moving forward another 90 days, we began to realize we weren't built like bears. We couldn't go inside our house and just hibernate for until this pandemic was over. So we had to start relaxing some of the restrictions we placed on people. And there were still a lot of requirements that we had to meet to be open, but it was not the total shutdown that it was in the previous 90 days. And then finally, a year later, 12 months later, we finally kind of eased restrictions more to where it was just became a recommended status instead of requirements for some of us. So that was a full 15 months of kind of restrictions placed on the way we do business and conduct our daily lives, which was upsetting to a lot of people across the globe. And finally, this is as of just a week or so ago, they finally lifted the final restrictions in the US to where we're in an all clear status. And we see most of the world coming back to normal. So I also wanted to take a look at school closures, because school closures has a secondary effect on the way we conduct our businesses. So many of our families now are dual income earners, and with school closures that put a crimp in their style, their daily lifestyle. So again, January 2020, there was no restrictions on school closures at all. And then look at this, 3 months later, except for 6 countries out of 260 countries, they had shut down the whole education system, which was required learning at home. So you can, I'm sure those of us who had kids, we all remember those days when we had to change on a dime and have kids at home full time and trying to get them to learn their lessons, school lessons, without too much disruptions. This is the beginning of last school year. There's still a mixture across the globe of restrictions and non-restrictions. But for most of the population of the world, there were still restrictions in place. And then finally this year, it seems to have eased up quite a bit in how school is conducting itself. So what lessons do we learn? Well, I came across a paper by McKinsey Company. The actual linkage is down at the bottom of the slide, where they did 10 lessons learned from this pandemic. And one of the first ones they said is infectious diseases are not just a health problem, but a whole of society problem. And I throw this second one in there just because I was amazed at the fact that they were able to develop a vaccine to combat this pandemic in 330 days. Now, I know there's a member of our mastermind group that's in this industry, so he could probably tell you that this was absolutely unheard of before this development of the COVID vaccine. It normally takes years and years to get something out. But even with the rapid development, there were still issues around the trust, the agility of getting the vaccine to different people, and the speed on which it was performed. And then there was the government responses. They were varied across the globe as they applied to schools and the economic stimulus. But the things I wanted to focus on, and this was a direct quote from one of their bullet points, is work will never be the same. It has changed tremendously, and this is a discussion point that I'd like to move into. And also the second one is we've had one pandemic, so let's plan for the next one, so we won't be caught flat-footed. So as we move forward, this is where the kind of discussion takes place. I'd like to hear from some of our participants and this slide talks about, this is a regular SWOT analysis, and this talks about the negative aspects, the weaknesses we found and the threats we have. So how did the pandemic catch you off guard? And then how did you react to this situation? And did this change make you rethink how you run your business? So can I get somebody to open up and give us their thoughts on what caught them off guard?
Hey, oh, go ahead, Sierra.
I just wanted to say my business actually came out of the pandemic. So we started in April 2020 officially, but I previously had been a teacher, kind of doing graphic design before teaching. So I was able to fold that in, and the nature of my work, it's actually been really great being able to take more Zoom meetings and things like that have made it more like the world is more adaptable now to the way I was hoping to work. In a weird way, it kind of worked out.
Oh, that's wonderful. This is a blessing for you.
I got lucky, I guess.
So Philip, I'll share. Some of you know that I also own a pet sitting business, a dog walking and pet care business in the local area. And what really caught me off guard was all work stopped. All work stopped, you know, in a business that was at the time 11 years old and very mature and ran like a well-oiled machine. Everything stopped. That's what caught me off guard in that business. Kristen?
I had similar as Trisha, online marketing, basically as small business owners, that was the first thing, which hindsight 2020 should have been the last thing that they cut was their online budget, because where did everybody spend all their time online? But I can't want it more than them. So just kept plugging away, kept networking, kept getting out there. And just like Sierra, I actually started a second business, firearms training, because of all of the garbage that came out of this as well. And so now I have both.
So we have some real go-getters on this call. They're not going to let any pandemic stop them from moving forward. Anything changed for the worst out of this pandemic?
I was going to say the biggest issue that I continue to see today is the change in attitude of folks working from home rather than coming into the business. And that continues to be an issue. Let you know, my wife and I were in San Francisco in January of 2020, and I believe she came down with COVID at that time. We were at an international, what we're going to call a biotech show, the JP Morgan, if anybody is aware. And we were meeting people from around the world at that show. And she basically came home with a flu-like condition, and the doctors kept saying, it's not flu A, it's not flu B, it's the flu. And we don't know what it is. And she was out for about 8 weeks. And as a consequence of that, in June, one of our clients came to us to create a new nasal wash and new mouthwash, which we created, and we found out that it was 99.8% effective against COVID. So basically, we accepted, we adopted, we moved forward, we created, and I mean, that's the fun part of it. Unfortunately, being in this industry and being a consultant to the manufacturers of the injectable, and I'm going to call it an injectable rather than a vaccine, please read the FDA comments on their inspection of those facilities and make a determination whether or not you want to have an injection. But I'll leave it at that. Sorry.
Okay. In terms of the work from home, it sounds like that was a problematic situation for you, Cortland.
That's correct. I mean, we're scientists. We're okay. You know, scientists work on a bench. We don't work from home.
Yeah.
And you cannot run experiments from the house. You cannot create new drugs from the house. You cannot do testing on machines from the house. You got to come into a lab and actually do that. So right now, the majority of my workforce is 40 and over. I don't really have a whole lot of folks that are under 40 right now. And it's the fact that, you know, that generation doesn't want to work and we can't bring them in. They want to stay at home. And this is a global problem. It's not just a problem here in Texas. It's a global problem. And we talk about it every week on a number of channels that, you know, what's going to happen to the future of medicine.
That's true. I being from the hospital industry, I know this has become a problem in the fact that a lot of nurses decided to call it quits and retire. And much like you're in your company, Cortland, a lot of the average age of the nurse is, I think, in the range of 47 to 48. It's going to be a continuing problem if we don't get an influx of students into the nursing schools.
So I'll finish. Oh, sorry, Philip. I just wanted to finish my pet sitting story. I did not have to close that business because we did adapt. And one of the things that came out of it was when key workers were allowed to go back to work after just a few days of lockdown, we also became key workers because they needed pet care for nurses, for our emergency staff, for doctors. And we were able to go back to work because, like Cortland, my staff can't sit at home. You can't take care of somebody else's animals from your house when you need to go to their house. So we got the legal documents in place and we became part of the essential workers pool, if you will. And we went back to work and we actually found a different space as ideal clients that we had not observed before. And that was something really good that came out of the pandemic as well, was that discovery of our new ideal client.
That's an interesting concept, the key worker idea. I think the first pass by the government agencies, for lack of a better term, was the key workers are your first responders. But with the trickle down that occurs within an economy, everybody ends up being an essential worker. The economy doesn't run without all these networks of people supporting other people. It's not a island economy. It's a global economy. Anything else? Okay,
I'll
Bill.
contribute, Phil. The time the pandemic started, I was the president of a business services company and provided services on site at a lot of different buildings, operations, but it was a lot of hospitals and also a lot of hotels and large office buildings. So we had an extreme shift in where our attention was, in that the hospitals had to keep their systems up and running, were short-staffed, and then some of the hotels and office buildings had the opposite problem of things weren't running, and there'd be big problems from equipment not running, from being vacant. But the very quick reaction we saw was more automation being invested in being able to operate with fewer people. And so, the facilities could be run with fewer people in attendance because people were out ill, and other buildings that were shut down, they're trying to reduce their costs. So they're investing in automation much more rapidly to be able to continue operating with fewer people. And that continued, through the whole time I was running that business up until last year when I left that company. Just a lot of further investment that reduces the number of people involved in providing the business services and maintaining a lot of operations in remote places.
Okay.
Dave Weaver has his hand up, Philip.
Okay, Dave.
Hey, thank you, Tricia. Yeah, Dave Weaver. So I got two comments. So transitioning or pivoting through COVID. I'm a 401k provider and financial planner. That's my day job. And really, I was already doing client meetings via Zoom. Really, the clients for me actually were very happy that we had already transitioned to a Zoom or a virtual or a hybrid type of, because I've got clients pretty much all over the country, and we were able to continue meeting and not really skip a beat. There was obviously a lot of concerns throughout the pandemic, especially and then as the market fell. However, it was one of the best times for the market. However, and then on my second, maybe my third comment is, throughout that process, we actually started an organization, the Veterans Chamber, and representing veteran business owners, and really that became a pivot point, because it allowed the veteran business owners to actually connect, and the passionate patriots to connect on a Zoom and a meeting. And launching out of the pandemic, in that time frame, now that everybody wants to get out, everybody's now starting to maneuver and meeting in person. They've already been started building the relationships online, and now they have started building the relationships on the outside, meeting for lunch or meeting at networking events, or whatever that is. So it's actually been a great thing for the small business owner to launch, if they've launched in the pandemic, or if they were able to pivot during the pandemic. And now that things are opening, people want to meet. So it's really creating a lot of energy around the activities that people are putting together, from either discussion forums that are in person, or lunches, or networking type of events, to where people want to get out of the actual house or their office. And my third comment is, I was with a employment forum yesterday with the HR executive directors, and they say, well, the pandemic's been great. People have been able to, the companies have been able to shift to a hybrid market, or been able to have remote workers. However, the HR folks are actually finding that the people are actually losing out on soft skills or people skills, because they're not meeting people in the office anymore, or they're doing so much at home that they're losing. So 10 years from now, we're going to have another challenge if everybody's working online. So that's my comments.
Those are perceptive, Dave. I appreciate it. And Omega, I believe you have your hand up.
Yes, sir. I was going to say that I think that being innovative with doing things online, like right now, we're having a leadership mixer and discussion online, and even in building and real estate, we've had where we just had to be agile with being innovative with meeting people online, or meeting people via Zoom, or just finding alternative ways to maneuver. I don't really look at the pandemic as a whole as a challenge. I look at it as a way of just maneuvering differently. And if we come out of this, great. If this is going to be the way things are for now on out, at least business owners know that they can use technology and certain skills to be able to still move business, just moving it in a different way.
Okay. Well, my next slide was to talk about the positive aspects, but we've already heard quite a bit from
we have a whole lot of victors on this call, Philip.
Yes, there's very few victims. So if anybody hasn't had an opportunity to weigh in, what has changed for the better? What were the benefits that you derived from the change?
Philip, if I could share one benefit, if you will, and it's we talk about kind of where things are going to look in 10 years and some of the problems we may face. My children and their friends, and these are high school age kids, so they're not little kids. If nothing else, their perception of what they saw me doing in my previous job for the 2 years during the pandemic, they said, I do not want that life. I don't want your lifestyle of working behind a desk all day and everything else. Is 14, 16-hour days at a computer trying to keep the business going. My younger son has said, I want to go be a welder, and he has very good plans about going into trade school and going that route. I've talked to more and more of these kids that are leaning that way, and it's because during the pandemic, they actually saw what their parents did for a living, working out of the house, and they said, your job sucks. I don't want that. I want to go do something that's more fulfilling for my life, and something where I can be outside and be hands-on with something. So I am hopeful for this in 10 years from now, when this generation goes out there, and we're not talking about a deficit of skilled electricians and just skilled laborers in general. So that's my positive note of some of the things I saw in the pandemic.
Very interesting take on that. That hadn't crossed my mind. I guess our generation went through high school, went to college, and then we're thrust into the business world, and we had to find our way. And yeah. Most of us, or a lot of us, ended up in an office behind a desk, coming in at 8 and leaving at 5. So very interesting take.
And when you take that mindset that behind the desk, you don't come in at 8 and leave at 5, you wake up and go to bed and you're there all the time. So, and that's what they saw. And they said, no, I'm gonna go do something more fulfilling than that. So
I've been working from home since 2003. It is there's some good things and some bad things about working from home. And one of them is the quitting time is relative. It's when the task that gets done. Whereas before it was, well, everybody else is leaving. I guess it's time for me to leave too. So, and then we heard a lot of opportunities that have opened up. I mean, new business went from a teacher to a graphic designer. We went from one company to 2 companies. So, you know, it was lots of excitement there. In fact, in the fact that people are seeing opportunities that didn't exist before. So anybody else want to weigh in on opportunities that they might have encountered during the past 2 years that they hadn't thought of previously?
I like the comment. I just saw small business, we hustle. And I think COVID basically put everybody up against the wall to just do a gut check, basically saying, you know, I have this business, whatever it may be, and how am I going to move it in this particular environment? So it did a gut check for a lot of people. A lot of people really birth new businesses or birth new ways to create capital. I know with our company, we're still doing a lot of automated stuff. So I look at it as it was just a challenge checker.
Okay.
So many things came out, even like you can close on a house without leaving your house that you live in now, right? I mean, everything comes to you.
Absolutely.
You can sign electronic documents. I mean, there's so many great things that came out of the situation, if you will, of being on lockdown. And you're right, Omega, when your back is against the wall, if you're willing and able and ready to move forward, you're going to, right? Other people just suffer. And the reason why all of us are on this Brady Bunch screen right now is because we do hustle, right? Because when our backs are against the wall, we do something about it, right? And we just don't cave in. Yeah. Sorry, Dave Weaver, I didn't mean to talk over you. I saw your hand.
No, you're good. You're good, Trisha. No, thank you. So I like the innovation piece, right? The other thing, I think of it as the pandemic really shook an old tree, and all the dead limbs and the dead leaves fell off, because if your business wasn't doing good and you weren't being able to pivot, your company probably died. However, you allowed new growth to start, and you can only do that by trimming the tree. And I think that's really as a metaphor as what's come out of the pandemic, and being able to do not only business here in Houston, but now you got people that are doing business that is across countries, across global markets virtually. And sometimes I think back to let's go back to like 1989, 1988. Had the pandemic happened then, what would we have done? We had no Zoom, we had no technology, no internet. We would have been a total different perspective on how we would have went through the pandemic. But that's just 2 comments.
I would have completed my 20-column worksheets at home, I guess. I do like that analogy of a tree service that comes out and clears out all the dead limbs and lets the air go through the tree and spurns new growth. Well, I appreciate everybody's willingness to share, and there are some great comments that came out of this. The next thing is, how do we plan for the future? What we want to do, and I'm piggybacking upon last month's talk by Shane when he talked about time management, is we want to spend an adequate amount of time thinking about and planning for the future to avoid the stress times of quadrant one. What we want to avoid is the great toilet paper panic of 2020. When everybody went out and bought toilet paper thinking that it was not going to be available for the next 5 years and stocked up on it.
You
So
say that, Philip, but even normal people like us, we would go to the grocery store, and if the toilet paper was on the shelf, we would buy it. We weren't hoarding it, but the mindset was, it's there, we better buy some, right?
yeah,
Even though we had some, but we didn't want to run out. And it really changed the way you think about what's on the shelf at the grocery store.
I'm still trying to figure out why milk was in such demand. I mean, you can't have a 3-month supply of milk because it goes bad in a week. So coming from the hospital industry, we had what we call disaster plans, and these were formal plans that we had to write and submit. We actually developed a disaster crash cart for the hospitals, to where all those plans were accumulated and stuck in several binders and put in this crash cart. And that crash cart included walkie-talkies and other items that were necessary to communicate during a disaster. But the disaster plans we developed at the hospital, they were multi-pronged. Some of them were weather related, some of them were surrounding infrastructure interruptions, others were economic interruptions. We never discussed the health and sickness interruptions that took place. So I'm sure all the hospitals around the country are pulling out their plans and addressing pandemics and how that affects their operations. But even the first three, those cascaded on one another. You know, a weather disaster could certainly become an infrastructure interruption and lead to an economic interruption. So what we did is we spent a great deal of time developing these disaster plans, and we actually did some role playing. We'd have a disaster event every quarter, and what we would do is we would just role play how things would play out when they gave us a scenario. And coming based on that, here's some ideas that I think are important when you start doing this planning for the future, especially around something like a disaster, is get your staff involved. The staff knows the nuts and bolts of what they do more so than you do. And something that seems insignificant to you might be very important to the overall functioning of what they do and what they produce. Nothing is too inconsequential to escape any review. Again, have multiple threads to your plan. Like I said, a weather event can certainly cascade to infrastructure interruption and end up being an economic interruption. Review your plans at least once a year because of the changing roles and responsibilities you have. And then, like I said, role play the different scenarios and have your team act out on that plan. And what that does, it uncovers some conflicts and discrepancies that maybe had previously not been discovered. And the best way I can describe that is to tell a situation that occurred when we went through a disaster plan. When I was with the hospital, we did a disaster plan where a hurricane was hitting, and we were basically incapacitated for about 10 days. And all these departments were putting their plans in place, and they were having semi tractor trailers coming in and parking on site to be the actual stores area. And we had a small surface lot that was adjacent to the hospital. And through that event, we found out that this little small lot was to somehow accommodate 18 to 20 different semi trailers. And it could probably fit about 3 or 4. Plus the fact that we had food items being stored next to medical waste and trash and sterile supplies all on the same lot. So we had to turn around and rethink our plan and come up with a different strategy on how we're going to stage different areas and different functions of our hospital or our organization. Who out there has some sort of disaster plan or does this type of planning for your business?
I saw
Omega.
Cortland. Yeah.
Well, being that we work as a team, we cross-train in our office to make sure that if there is an emergency, family-wise and personal, or just an emergency that's just going on in the field, that we'll be able to cover down. Most of our staff is prior military, so we have different SOPs, if you will, that are wrote up on how to maneuver if there's a thunderstorm, if there's a fire in the building, if we have a client show up and there's a realtor that's sick, you know, what to discuss with that client. We have a file manager that we all can see each other's files and read the notes, where we'll be knowledgeable about what's going on with that client if that agent is out sick, or if whatever's going on, we can read the notes and pick up where they left off.
Okay. Great comments. Sounds like you have, you're trying to cover all the bases. Of course, something always comes up that is not planned. Cortland, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to say, you know, as a pharmaceutical company, we are required to have a disaster recovery plan. And once again, our plan does not cover economic disaster. I had never thought about it an economic disaster per se as part of the disaster recovery plan. We have it for weather, utilities, computer systems, those kinds of things. But I'd never thought about economic disaster. But I pray to God that FDA doesn't require that one as well.
Well, sorry I put that thought in your head. Anybody else have a comment?
Well, I think that's the thing, right? No one could really plan for what we were faced with. You know, to say that the government was going to shut everything down, and yeah, while a lot of businesses were deemed essential and several were able to pivot and a lot of new businesses were started, you know, my heart breaks for those small businesses that have been in business forever. You know, think about restaurants in New York City, or really any town of significance that they had no options. You know, they weren't even allowed to do carry out. There was nothing. They were down, or gyms that had to close. You know, I think for the most part, we saw a lot of people resign thinking the grass was greener on the other side. And now you're starting to read reports about people that are rethinking those decisions, right? The biggest thing that for businesses and for people like us that are on this call that will still be going on, and we won't really know the answer for a while, unfortunately, is the cultures. You know, how are we going to maintain cultures, build cultures, continue cultures? How are we going to manage people? How are we going to, as Cortland said, there's a whole generation of people that are seeing things totally differently. How do we mesh cultures and generations and lives, goal lives overall, to really come together again and be productive the way we were? And that's really to me, the thing that is going to wash out of what we've seen. Forget all the decisions and the things that were made. We can't do anything about that. But moving forward, how are we going to really come back together and figure out ways to be as productive as we were, so that everybody's moving in the same direction?
Thank you for that, John. I know that's the social aspect of working from home is something I've missed. Just getting to know the people and kind of just spend time with them. the nice thing is I've developed friendships across the country that I would not have developed if I hadn't been working from home, because I've been living on conference calls or Zoom for about 15 years, 16 years. So I know people now that I never would have come across, and that's been one of the benefits from this. And even this call here, we've come to, like Omega, she's in Central Texas in the Waco area, you know, never would have come across her if she hadn't found us on LinkedIn and decided to have a listen to see if it was of interest to her. Appreciate the joining this, Omega.
Absolutely.
If there's nothing else to discuss, I'm going to end on a up note with a comment from Zig Ziglar. Success is what happens when opportunity meets preparation. So with that, I'm going to say that's all I have for today. So if anybody has any comments or questions, feel free to raise your hand.
Thank you, Philip. That was awesome. So does anybody have something that they're like, oh, you know what, that's a great idea, or I'm glad that you shared that really popped in your mind today that you're taking away from this session? Go ahead, Kristen.
So just a good reminder, whether you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner or a large business, it's just always to be prepared, because we never know what's going to happen. I mean, you know, yeah, we down here prepare for, you know, storms and et cetera. So that kind of prepares us for other things. But I mean, who would have thought we would have had a pandemic, you know? So, I mean, it's just anything can happen.
Yeah, my hurricane box did not hold us over into the pandemic, right? So it's like, what do we got in the hurricane box? Yeah, that was bad. Well, and I appreciate I love that when Philip was asking for, you know, what were the things that didn't work for you when the pandemic hit, that we were all already on the next slide, right? Talking about how we pivoted and the things that we did. And that's what makes all of us successful, but as a group, even better, right? Where we've got people coming to the mastermind and sharing ideas, and everybody's on a positive note. And oh, by the way, if you show up and you're a little negative, it's okay. We'll pick you up. And that's what we're here for, right? And we'll pick you up. It's all good. Anybody else have something that they're walking away with today? Andrew?
I was going to say, Trisha, I think it reiterates the point, and thanks, Philip, for sharing that every change presents opportunities. And, you know, we talked about major, you know, global changes, but the same thing could apply at smaller scales, you know, things that happened to our plan at the beginning of the week, and then suddenly we're able to pivot. And so just keep that in mind. Every change presents opportunities, and some people look at the change as a risk and something to be avoided. And other people look at that as, how am I going to get ahead? How am I going to be able to use that in a positive way? So, you know, let's keep that in mind.
Thanks, Andrew.
I think you're right, Andrew. And a lot of that comes out of the goals and priorities, right? If you have goals and priorities set, the pandemic, or, you know, as bad as it was, it's a hurdle. It's a roadblock. It's a detour. The goal, if we stay focused on that, you know, just like, you know, Cortland, man, imagine you got to have scientists there. You got to have, you know, they've got to trial and error and do that together so they know what the heck's going on, not to mention the things that have to be secured. But if you have the goal, you figure out a way to get it done. And I think that's the consensus that we've gotten in this group. And that's why so many people were like, yeah, there was bad stuff, but here's how I got around that. Here's what I did differently. Here's the way we're going to tackle that. And I think that's still what businesses are faced with today. I think you see the strong businesses that had strong employees that cared. They were able to figure that out and kind of thrive and move forward. And those businesses that had a lot of problems, they were exposed and they're still being exposed. So it's just a matter of adapting and overcoming, which the military people on here can definitely attest to, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Miguel, did you have something?
No, just everything was a very good topic. And just second what everybody said, this challenge is an opportunity. I had to work in the pandemic to make sure those people who needed equipment, they work from home, plus running a 24/7 medical facility is very tough, but you learned and you prepare, but it's, a lot of facilities change, and some of them for good and some of them improve their operation at the end of the day to provide better services for the client. But it's just, you have to adapt and use technology and move on. And because of the pandemic, I worked very hard, I worked too hard, and that's what I'm doing right now, which I'm very happy.
Awesome. I'm putting the Texas Leadership Network LinkedIn profile in the chat window. So for those of you who aren't following, we'd love for you to. And the masterminds are announced out there so that you don't forget them. And if you join us once, then you'll get reminders for subsequent monthly updates on those. So thank you to those of you who joined us today. Great minds come together and we all walk away with something. So Omega and Sierra and oh, we lost Dave. Thank you guys for joining for the first time. We'd love for you to come back. We continue to have great conversations here. We make the announcement on the topic a couple of weeks before we actually come together. So be on the lookout for that. And I hope all of you have an amazing afternoon. Philip, excellent job. We appreciate the topic that you brought together for us today. And we look forward to seeing everyone next month on, somebody's looking at the calendar. It will be the second Thursday, the 8th. So September 8th is when we'll come back together. You guys have an amazing afternoon. Bye.
Bye.
Great
Thank
job,
you.
Philip.
Great job, Philip.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Philip. Bye.